Well, hello again. We finally got everything put back together. A brand new water pump down in there. I'll tell you what, messing with these old cars, I had almost forgotten how difficult it can be. There is so much crap down there, so many brackets and so many bolts. It's incredible. Anyway, it's all back together now. And I took the alternator down to O'Reilly and had them run it on their test bench down there. And it's putting out 14.68 volts, which is good, okay? The problem we're having turns out to be the wiring, I think. It was so corroded. I spent the last half an hour or so cleaning up these connectors. They were just so corroded you couldn't even see the metal. They were just green with corrosion. So we'll be putting those back on, but not yet because I still have the other half. The other half to this connector is really bad off. We're going to have to do something with that at a later date. I just want to make sure we're charging right now. So let's take a look at the other half, which is really, really bad. I mean, the corrosion was about as bad as I've ever seen it. Look at that. Let me get down here nice and close so you can kind of get an idea of what we're putting up with. Look at the corrosion down in that hole there. See all that green crap? That's all going to have to come out. And this, like I said, this entire, I'm going to have to come up with some kind of a wiring setup on this. And what they did was normally this thing came out and was connected to there. I don't know why it was cut in half. It was cut in half. It's a very long wire. But I'm going to go ahead and remove this as a ground. I'm going to clean it up and put that all back in. And I'm going to snip this wire. We're going to take out this harness right here, pull it out up on top where I can get to it better to clean it. Then we'll go ahead and splice this all back together, make it look real purty. And we'll come back when I get it cleaned up. Or maybe I'll come back before that to show you how I'm doing it. You can't leave wires like this, guys. You got to get them shiny and clean. If you can't get them shiny and clean, it's better to just go ahead and cut off the connector and just hardwire it, wire to wire with splices, with heat shrink over the top until you can come up with a new connector. That may be what I'll have to do before it's over. I can't go with one that won't clean up. Got to have good voltage to that battery. Batteries are too expensive. Better to waste one of these than it is to waste a battery. Now here's one way that I always use, to clean out corrosion and crap and everything down in these holes. That's just to take a nice drill bit, not some piece of crap, and let me zero in here a little bit more. Yeah, you want it to be slightly smaller than the hole, and just stick it down in there, and then use your hand to rotate it in reverse, okay? And that'll scrape the sides. You go up and down as you do it, and you don't want one too tight. The idea here is to remove the corrosion, not the metal pin, okay? You will remove some of it, especially if it's a nice sharp drill, which is what I have right here. And you got to be careful not to cut your fingers, okay? But you just ream it out. Basically, you're using it as a reamer. I don't have a very, very small, tiny wire brush. I wish I did, but I don't, and you could use that too. And then when I spray it out with contact cleaner, this CRC contact cleaner, every maybe 5 or 6 turns, I give it a little squirt on both sides, get both sides down in there and get them as clean as you can, and you can shine them up pretty good that way. We were successful in cleaning up those babies. They're nice and shiny now. I don't know if you can see that down in there. Nice and shiny all the way around, all the way down to the bottom. The only problem we have right now is that gap. I don't know if you can see that gap. It might be a little blurry. Let me see. Can you see that gap right there? There's a gap between this side and this side, so we're going to have to close that thing. Normally you can take a pair of pliers and squeeze the plug, and it'll cause those things to go together, but this plug is very brittle. You can already see that part of it's been broken off years ago, and I think that was this wire right here. So what I'm going to do is an old trick I used for many years. I'm going to take a flat jeweler's screwdriver, and if this is too big, I'll try to find an even smaller one. I'm going to get it down between the plastic and the metal, and then just kind of push both sides together and see if I can close it up. You don't have to close it up all the way, but you got to close it up enough where, see that gap? You want to do your best to close it up. See, this one here is right together, see it? That's what you're really looking for, but chances are I won't get that. You got to be careful, whereas one sometimes will come this way and they'll go that way, and then they'll overlap each other, and you're like, oh, now I got to bend it back out again. So it's, you know, cleaning these plugs, old nasty old plugs. Now eventually I'm going to replace all this crap. Matter of fact, this I don't even like where this solenoid is located. That solenoid is going to be moved up here somewhere. By the way, for those of you who own a 66, this was pointed out to me by our good buddy Nick, who has Vintage Thunderbird Repair, his channel. He said these two holes right here, these two dimples, this one and this one, I didn't know what they were for, but he said you can take that vacuum canister that's down in here that I put in with these bolts here. He said you can drill those out and put them in right here and mount that canister right there like that. Well, I thought that was a pretty cool idea. I wish I'd have known about it first, but I didn't. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave it here, unless it gives me a headache, and then I'll go ahead and move it over here. I'd rather have it up here. But I want my starter solenoid somewhere up here. This down in here like this just sucks in my mind. I do not like that. It's too close to the battery, no space at all. Can't use it. It's very difficult to get connectors on when you're using your remote starter. It's just a lousy idea. That was a lousy idea. By the way, I got rid of that little short battery cable that was causing me to make my battery go at an angle in order to reach it. I bought a 15-inch one here. The one that was on there was 10 inches. Now I got a 15. Now a little bit of flexibility there. Okay, back to our connector. Sorry for the little side trip there. The gap is pretty much gone. I got it pretty well squoozed together. There's maybe a 1/16 of an inch there. But it's all much better than it was. I don't want to force the issue on this thing too much. By the way, when it comes to cleaning these things now, this is not one of those one lick and it's over. It takes time to clean these old things. I've worked on them as many as 2 hours. They had, multiple pins like this. Got them all shiny and everything. When I put it back together, it didn't work after all. So, it's not guaranteed success, but, you do the best you can. And if it just, like I said, if it just turns out it's not going to work, you just lop that baby off of there and hardwire it in with some heat shrink and run with it until you can get a better plug. Or some other kind of a gizmo that you want to hook up. Okay, now for the ground, that ground screw down there, there's not a... I keep repeating this, it just never ceases to amaze me. There is nothing in this car that's not messed up. If I spent 20 years trying to screw all this up, I couldn't have done it. Okay, but of course, this being a 54-year-old car, I guess there's a lot of people could have screwed it up over the years. Let's get this out of here. Well, that's out, and this is our ground wire that it was grounding out, and you can see it's corroded pretty bad too. So we're going to take this sucker over. I'm going to run some heat shrink down here, try to shrink it up, make it a little bit stronger. It's cracked in places. Look at that. Anyway, we're going to do our best to make this work until we get the car started and running. Once it's started, once it's running, once we back out of the garage and drive it around a little bit, then we're going to park it again. We're going to work on the interior, and we're also going to work on doing some cosmetics out here, a little at a time. It's going to be great. It's going to be a long, look, with a hobby classic car, there's never an end to things to do. Never. So let's clean this up on the old wire brush on my bench grinder and see what we can do. So far, I just went ahead and cleaned them all up best I could. Shined them real good and got all the corrosion off, and then heat shrinked them, one inside of another, and then heat shrinked them along the line here, right there and right there, and then heat shrinked them on the end after we got them nice and clean, which gives them added strength and a lot better insulation. The same thing over here. This was pretty messed up right here, so I heat shrinked underneath these two right here. I had a piece of industrial strength heat shrink that was given to me a while back. I slid that up this wire here that was kind of funky up here near the connector. Shrunk that down first and then put these two over the top. This one right here, and the second one is right here. You can see the separation. One inside the other, one larger than the other, and then heat shrink the other end after I cleaned it up. So, and then I did one more thing. This is kind of a tedious thing. You got to take your time, do it right the first time, or you'll pay the price. Down there on the where the ground wire bolts to the body, I went ahead and removed some of the paint around that hole. I want a good solid ground connection with this bolt right here. We're going to have a nice solid connection with that thing. And then we're going to do the same thing to this one down in here. This one down in here, this wire, this is the negative battery cable. There's a thing wrapped around a bare spot on the cable. You can see it, that's all it is. And then that's bolted to the body. And I don't quite understand why they did that, but because it runs on over here and it goes over and it bolts to the engine block right there. So I'm not sure I understand what that's all about. They have it grounded in two places. There must be a reason for it. I don't know, but I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go ahead, now that we have this all shined up, I don't have to worry about that anymore. But we're going to go ahead and remove that bolt as well. Clean it up the best we can. I'm going to remove that cable up out of there and shine that whole mess up and try to get all that to where it's going to be nice contact with the body as well. And once we get that done, we should be in pretty good shape. I think we get the battery back in, and we'll go ahead and see if we can't crank this baby up and then test. And once it starts, if it starts, there's not any water running everywhere, then we'll go ahead and test the the battery to see if the alternator is charging, and if not, well, we'll shut her down and keep looking, because I've got to have an alternator that works. Now you can see why we have to work on that as well. It's pretty rusty down in there. I'm not even sure the bolt going through the metal was providing a decent ground. And then if you look at the connector that was there, it's pretty mangy. Let's see, yeah, I got this thing, I think a little too close or something. There we go. See how mangy that is? It's not establishing a good ground right there, which I'm not sure why we even need that ground. But and then down on the engine block, which takes a 3/4 inch bolt, this thing here is about worn out. I don't think I've ever seen any hole that would. But anyway, I guess if the engine were to pull it loose, you'd at least still have a ground down here. I guess that's what it's all about. Or one is the ground here, and the other one's just around there to ground the block itself. It's the only thing I can think of. Anyway, let's clean this mess up. We're finally done cleaning things up. Doesn't that look a whole lot better now? And over here, looks real good. This thing did not have a lock washer on it to screw it into the block. I'm putting one on. I don't like that idea at all. You know, I've already spent a small fortune just on lock washers for this entire car. There was no lock washers anywhere. The water pump only had one. Then it was flattened out, no good. Anyway, and then I put a flat washer on the end of the each of the battery cables. I have never liked taking the nut and tightening it up to where it chews into the battery connector here and just chews it all up and everything. I'd rather have something flat to tighten it up against. Yeah, you get a little corrosion in there sometimes, but if you stay on top of it, it won't happen. You know, you can always loosen it up, clean it up, put it back. Which brings me up to the next topic. Let me preach to you for a while. Wintertime's almost around the corner, especially for you folks up north. We've got a few months to worry about it, but you know, it's just almost on top of you guys. It won't be long. One of the most neglected parts on any car, I don't care if it's new, old, in the middle, is the battery. You know, we Americans, we got this bad habit. We never even pay attention to the battery until one day we go out and turn the key and it quits. It doesn't work. Then it's like, oh, must be my battery. When's the last time you checked the water? I don't know. I don't think I ever did, you know. And then you open the hood and both terminals are just covered with corrosion. And it's like, well, I don't know. I guess I never bothered to think about it much. But now I'm going to think about it because I'm broke down. Anyway, have your battery checked at an auto parts store. It's free. They'll come out into the parking lot and check your battery for you. And they'll also check your alternator. Free. O'Reilly does it for me. They checked my alternator out down there and didn't charge me a penny. Of course, I took it into them, but they can check it on the car or off the car. Don't neglect these batteries. You know, wintertime coming up there in the north, I just can't even imagine not checking your battery or alternator before winter starts. Down here, it's no problem. You know, we don't even, we barely hit below 20 degrees down here in the winter, just every so often. You know, it's kind of a fluke. But anyway, you can do some things, though, you know, if you do check your water. This is called a battery terminal cleaner. I've had one for years. This is all metal. I guess most of them are all plastic now, but it comes apart. This is the reamer for getting inside the battery terminal. It really cleans it up really nice. And then this here is for the battery post. This little wire brush, you stick it down the post and go back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth. Cleans them up really good. So a little word to the wise: you get your battery and your alternator checked now. You know, the whole process won't take, what, 30-40 minutes downtown, depending on how busy they are at the store. Usually a whole lot less than that. Some of you probably pass those auto parts stores every night on the way home from work, and, you know, pull in there, say, hey, look, check me out, then head on home when you're done. Okay, I've got everything shined up and ready to go. I'm going to have to tin this wire here, which is a ground wire, and this other one here. I'm going to have to connect those two together. This is alternator wire here that comes out. But anyway, let's get to it. I want to get it back together. I've also cleaned around that hole real good and cleaned it up with some Windex. Alright, let's get it back together. What I'm going to do is, it plugs in real good, feels good, makes good contact, so I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping it from here like they had originally with electrical tape. I'm going to wrap it all the way up and kind of protect this to keep the moisture out. Wrap it all the way up, all the way to here. We'll just probably maybe put 2 layers on it, because we do get a lot of moisture in Arkansas in the spring and fall. Much, much better. That's the way I like it. Now what we're going to do here is put I heat shrinked that ground wire together after I soldered it together and took off that crimp-on thing they had there. I'm going to put a wire tie here. I'm going to put a wire tie on the other side of this connector on both sides, and that'll hold that in place. And then all we got to do is get down there and hook 3 wires to the back of the alternator and hope for the best. Jim writes, the body work is just about done. The cylinder heads are rebuilt with new valves, valve springs, hardened valve seats, etc. I'm getting ready to rebuild the top side, new camshaft, lifters, push rods, timing chain, etc. I thought I'd send a few pictures of the new paint. We took it back to its original color, dark metallic turquoise. I'll send more photos when it's assembled. I really like that color. I'd say we're about ready to go. The old battery's in, charged up. I've checked everything. There's probably something I overlooked. It always happens. Got the old fire extinguisher sitting here just in case she decides to blow up. I filled the entire water jacket as much as I could through the heater hose before I hooked it back up here. I just held it up, stuck a funnel in the top, kept pouring water in until it finally showed up as being, water started coming back at me. So the engine jacket, the water jacket should be full, and the fan belts are all good. All the bolts are supposed to be tight. I don't know. I still haven't worked on that leaky brake line, but it doesn't matter. I also cranked down on the a little bit on the idle screw, so I don't know. Maybe I'll have to crank it back up. But for right now, I cranked it down just a little bit. And let me mount this camera on the tripod right here. And then we'll go ahead and just turn it on, and then I'll jump in the car and see if we can't get this thing to purr like a kitten. With no water, of course, on the floor. Oh yeah, one more thing. After the car starts, if it does start again, I'm going to go ahead and take the old multimeter here and stick it on the battery and see if we're getting some good charging. I'll just put it across there, put it on DC volts. On the 20 volt scale, if I can get it in the camera here, and then we'll just see what our voltage reads over there. Well, let's give it a little squirt of go-go juice here. It's been sitting for a while. We'll give her a little squirt of go-go juice here, see what happens. Well, obviously we have our fan blade hitting the shroud somewhere. Well, I loosened up these two screws right here that hold the top of the shroud. The bottom of the shroud goes into a clip. It's a clip like this, and the bottom of the shroud fits into the clip, one on each side. So you don't have to worry about screwing the bottom part in. But I went ahead and loosened up these two bolts that hold the top, and then I pulled up on one side and then the other and tightened them back up, and I got plenty of clearance around there. Plenty of clearance, so maybe that'll solve it. I don't know. Let's try it again. No water yet. Well, the water's starting to bubble up in the tank. It's starting to come on up. Pretty soon it'll overflow. That's when our trouble started last time. Well, I'll be darned. The thermostat is open. So I guess filling up that water jacket helped a lot. The thermostat is open, and I'm getting antifreeze up through into the tank. It's looking real good. The temperature gauge apparently is working on this car because it shows below a half, but above cold. So I don't know. I mean, we'll see. It's doing real good so far. No complaints. And no water leaks underneath. Well, I'm glad of that. I was tired of mopping up water. I think what I'll do is put the radiator cap on now and see what happens. I think she's doing good. Let's rev her up a little bit. But we'll work on that later. One thing at a time, you know. Now let's test our alternator. It's reading good, 14.4 volts. All right, I like that. All right, I think we can call that a success as far as that water leak repair goes. Don't ask me why it stopped leaking. The water pump didn't look like it was putting out the water. It must have. You know, it's the only thing it could have been in my mind, but you never know. You never know. I'm real happy about this. This is great. I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and call this a video over. And before next time, I hope to have the brake lines repaired. And maybe we can go for a ride. It all depends on what happens with my car insurance. Right now I'm trying to find a good car insurance for classic cars. I have 3 that I'm looking at. I'm working in conjunction with Brendan because he uses Haggerty. And my insurance company, they'd like us to use American collectors. And so we're looking at both, and both have advantages over the other. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, until next time, I hope you enjoyed this one. This is John. Oops, one more thing. It's always one more thing, isn't it? I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the negative post on this battery. I don't know. There may be something causing a slow drain of the battery. There may be a short somewhere. So we're going to go ahead and test that between now and the next video to find out if there is some kind of a drain. I don't want to drain the battery down, so we're going to take it out of the circuit. Each time we want it back on, we'll reconnect it. But we've got to find out if everything is copacetic, you know what I mean?